Welcome everyone to day 9 of the Sewing Room Declutter Challenge 2025. I'm Karen Brown of Just Get It Done Quilts, and together we are going to clear out the unwanted, the unwelcome, and the no longer necessary to make space for 2025. And today we are dealing with threads. Threads are the supporting characters in our quilt making. Fabric gets all the attention and the largest chunk of the budget, but thread is what holds it all together. And today is the first day that I'm going to be talking about legacy, because chances are somewhere in your sewing space there's a spool that's older than you are. Those beautiful old spools most likely came from another quilter. It might have been your mother, your grandmother, an aunt, or a cousin. Maybe even someone you didn't know. When you inherit items or you're given someone else's stash, usually it arrives in bags and old containers. And it's a huge effort just for you to unpack it. And then we feel this obligation to make good use of it. Just remember that this was the stuff that was left behind. Items that were never used, and often for a good reason. There's labels missing, there's packages with maybe only 1 or 2 items left, and some notions might actually be used. I am giving you permission to let go of anything that doesn't serve you. Just because you accepted them doesn't mean you have to use them. And most times you've done somebody a favor by taking it all off their hands. They probably have no idea what's in the containers. And if you are worried that they will ask about something specific in the containers, ask them if they want anything back. Just remember, this was their legacy, not yours. And that leads into today's topic, threads. I think more than any other notion, we hang on to those old spools the most, probably because we use so much of it. However, threads only have a shelf life of 10 years before they begin to get brittle and lose their strength. It's a hard lesson that you don't want to learn. Plus, if they have been left out in the open, they will be covered in dust, which will play havoc with your tension and your sewing machine. I know it's hard, but just let them go. But you may find this too hard to do. So just gather up all those old spools, keep them separate in a bag, and use them for basting. Last year, I finally used up one of my old spools in basting my hexies for English paper piecing. I'm sure I used it in home ec. And of course, if you have any of those old wooden spools, you probably will want to keep those. I have personally added a couple to my treasure box, and I know crafters can do some very clever decorations with them. So now we have all the memories dealt with. Let's sit down and figure out what capacity in our sewing room do we have left for threads. How much do you want your threads to occupy? Several years ago, I decided that this was my thread drawer. And I made these wonderful trays. I made them out of foam board. You can see that I've tripled the capacity of the drawer. This is fine and dandy for the threads that I use at my sewing machine. But remember, threads have a function too. So the question you should be asking yourself today on day 9 is this the thread to be used here? We have the threads that we piece with, the threads that we quilt with, and I'm sure you probably have at least one specialty thread like these metallics. So as before, I've said it's important that you have easy access to your threads where you actually use them. So this tray is great for all my 100% cotton that I use when I piece. And I do have this spot on the door to my sewing machine where I keep my neutrals. All my king spools I have moved to my studio where I have my long arm. I have a rule that I can only buy new thread when I use up a spool, because as you can see, I'm at my capacity. Now I keep all my Invisalign 100-weight very fine polyester with my slow sewing. I did spend the morning gathering up all my sewing on the go kits and my slow sewing kits. As I have so many of them this year, they've become quite scattered over the house. And a couple of years ago, I purchased somebody else's embroidery supplies. Since I only use them occasionally, I keep them on a rack here with all my other embroidery supplies. I also have some specialty threads that I piece with. Iron Infuse, this is Rinse and Gone, this is Flash, which are threads that are photosensitive. and these fluorescents. And if I have a bobbin full of this thread, I also keep them in here. And I keep these in my drawer underneath my cotton. And I do have this other tray where I keep my 12 weights. I have my metallics in here. I have some embroidery threads here. These are the ones that I sew with. I think I may move them to go with my serger. And here are some variegated threads that I'm often using when I'm making postcards. For bobbins, you need to keep them near the machine that uses them. And how many do you actually need? How many bobbins do you have with those little bits on them? Consider using them with a bobbinator, or using them up working with some bonus blocks or practice pieces, or just transfer all those bits to one bobbin and use them in your basting. That's what I do. So what if you can't fit all your threads in? Take a look at the type of threads that you have. You might have purchased some of these metallics, but only used them once. Or look at the weights of your thread. Will you ever use that 12 weight thread, or maybe that 100 weight? You can also look at the shape of your spools. If you have one that's just an outlier, consider decluttering those ones. You might have thread for other crafts, like floss for cross stitch or embroidery. How many of those projects will you make in the next 5 years? I like to organize my threads by color. It just brings a smile to my face. I also like to add a groove to any spool that needs one. Now, when you're working on this challenge, I recommend listening to one of my Karen's Quilt Circle interviews, one with Anita Zobens and one with Stephanie Nagai of Wonderfills. They both have wonderful advice on how to use and play with your threads. And I think it's Angela Walters that says, quilting is her therapy, but threads are the meds. Does that sound good? So have fun. And if any of you have found a really good thread nest today, be sure to post it online in the comments or in the Facebook group with the hashtag Declutter Challenge 2025. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow for day number 10.